in terms of injuries, we always talk about injury prone, like are players injury prone or are they not? Walker is one of those guys who I would say is injury prone or at least on the list to be concerned about because it's all lower extremity. It's all groin injuries, it's hamstring injuries, it's ankle injuries, it's all soft tissue. And I do think there's something to tie in to his biomechanics, how he runs, how he moves. I think there's some concern there.
What is going on, fantasy football family? It is your resident Swami of Konami, Rich Hribar, and we are here with part 2 of our injury conversation with Jeff Mueller. You can find him as an injury analyst over at Destination Devy and 444 Football. Jeff, we did wide receivers in the first segment. Now we're going to go over to the running back position. And, I will say, the running back injuries as we head into the season, like they're pretty mild. Knock on wood. Hopefully we can get through kind of the summer here. And the first guy's not even really injured right now. We have to talk about this, right? Because, I have been, bullish on Christian McCaffrey this offseason. I have literally been telling everyone, I don't see him as a play to lose pick. I see him as a play to win pick. And you can let me know if I'm wrong about that or not. He just turned 29 this past June. He talked about this offseason that he made a lot of changes. He talked about last season, the Achilles tendonitis was a byproduct of him really trying to bounce back from the 400 touch season. And he ended up overworking himself last offseason. And he's really changed kind of his, attack this offseason. He's used the word patience. He's been a lot more patience this offseason. We heard Clay Kubiak, who's the offensive coordinator, not Clint Kubiak, another Kubiak we've got, involved in the 49ers. His quote was, we're going to give him the ball as much as we can. Now, I know that, like a lot of people drafted CMC 101. They come into Monday night last year and they find out, not only is he not going to be active, they're going to put him on IR. So they're not touching him. He's missed time now in three seasons. He's missed double-digit games. A lot of people don't want to draft him. First of all, I want you to provide some clarity on the Achilles tendonitis because people hear the word Achilles associated with the running back, and it's always been like fantasy juju. Like, nope, just like cross them off the list. Even though we had a couple guys actually bounce back from actual Achilles tears and been kind of productive, since then. So first of all, touch on that, then talk about the PCL as well. And then we'll get into some Christian McCaffrey nuts and bolts about the 49ers.
Yeah, I swear, Rich, if you just jinx his health, man, I'm going to come for you. He is finally healthy. But you're right. People see that, especially running back, see Achilles, all the stuff that happened last year. They're jaded. But the good thing is, so there's a difference between tendinosis and tendinitis. Tendinitis, inflammatory process, it does go away. And you're 100% right, especially, with what CMC was talking about of overusing. He was coming off a calf injury from the Super Bowl, and he was doing a ton of sprinter drills. And one of the main things that leads to Achilles tendinitis are actually sprinter drills. And so he was trying to rehab from that. Didn't go well, caused flare-ups. It actually caused flare-ups on both sides. He winds up getting stem cell treatment. The thing that I think my main takeaway would be that I would want everyone to know is that tendinitis goes away. It can go away. So I honestly think we should be giving him a clean slate here. And I know I'm gonna get a bunch of comments like, "Wow, he's a 49ers fan, etc." No, as a physical therapist, I can't tell you how many people we've treated for tendinitis that their symptoms go away. It totally clears up. And especially if you've changed your training regimen, if you've changed your rest and recovery, which is probably the most important. He is one of those players. I put Christian McCaffrey in the same bucket as a Tom Brady, as a Drew Brees, in terms of work ethic, but also rest and recovery. LeBron James, those guys, they know how to, if something's wrong, they know how to change, or they figure it out. They spend the money to change their regimen to make sure they're healthy. So from the Achilles standpoint, I do think we need to give him a clean slate. The main thing I would be concerned about is the PCL injury, but by all accounts, it was a grade 2 sprain. It fully healed. He was using a brace for minimal shearing of the joint so it would heal properly. And by all accounts, he's been back to his training regimen since I believe it was March or April this year. And he's entering camp fully healthy. So I don't think it's going to be like a Paris Campbell situation. I don't think it's going to be like a Zeke who had the PCL sprain and bone bruise that lasted for a while. I don't think it's going to be like one of those situations. I think as you're drafting, if you haven't drafted yet, watch for any news as camp starts up. But he's full go, and by all accounts, he's fully healthy. And I believe that from an injury standpoint on both the Achilles and the PCL.
Yeah, he was at OTAs, not on the pup. Like I said, it's funny we're starting off with a guy that's not injured, but because he has so much, injury baggage, I guess you would sort of say, people, anytime you draft the 101 and you feel like you just didn't get any payout, like people are always going to be jaded about that. You triggered something that I brought up. I pitched this a couple weeks ago on a show with Ian Harditz, but he's not a doctor with any medical background either. So I'm gonna pitch it to you.
He's close. He's close.
You brought up Tom Brady and you brought up LeBron, and these are the two names I brought up. And so we're in an era now where we're seeing these players invest so much time and money into their bodies. I think Brady could have played till he was 50 easy. I mean, you see him on this sports science stuff, and sports science has come so far since, I've been around either, and especially even more so in your field. So like I brought this up about Derrick Henry, like, how should we be handling age now in relation to fantasy football? And you work for a dynasty site. So how much should we be moving the goalposts with player age? Like, because we're putting these guys in these buckets of like, oh, this guy hit 29, he hit 30, he hit 31. Jeff, I just turned 43. I feel like I'm no athlete. I feel in great shape. Like I feel better than I did in 30 because I changed my lifestyle. And these guys are millionaires pouring thousands and millions of dollars into their body. So should we be making any adjustments on player age? Like how should we be handling player age right now?
I really think it comes down to an individual case where, and it really relies on information that is leaked, or if the player has talked about it on podcasts and interviews, which honestly, in our era of playing fantasy football, I'm grateful for, like, there's so many podcasts out there and these players are giving more and more information. I don't know if you've noticed that over the years. And even guys like Saquon, Nick Chubb talks about it a lot. I love that quote he recently had, by the way, on work ethic. Less people in Houston talking, they just want to work. Such a good quote. But so you have some of these players that you have to know which players are investing in their bodies and which ones are not. And I say that kind of loosely because I can't tell you, I can't tell you which players have been not investing in their body because I'm not with them. I'm not, it's not like we spy on them throughout the whole off season. I wish I could in some circumstances, just to be able to know what people are doing. Like Kenneth Walker, I would love to know what he's been doing just from a rest and recovery and training standpoint.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about him.
We are. But yeah, some of these guys, I mean, like Derrick Henry, people were fading him 4 years ago, and he's still going strong. Saquon, people were fading him. Granted, he was on New York, so that was valid. But people were fading him for a while, and it's like, well, he's still going strong. It's kind of a hard question to answer, but I think it's very individual based and just really locking down which guys are really investing their time and energy and their money, their resources, versus who's just taking the paycheck and kind of going about their day.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of came to the conclusion it's like, if a player's still performing at a level like Derrick Henry, like let his play tell us when he's going, granted it could come swift. It doesn't, that's how the NFL works. But I mean, 2,000 yards last year and just him on the Ravens, because it was so obvious, right? And Saquon on the Eagles. What's funny, I was on one and not the other. I was on Saquon, getting to play behind that offensive line and just getting to play with that, because it was the most talent Saquon had ever been around, like wide receiver wise. And I was just like, and I don't want to overthink this, right? Like, but with Derrick Henry, I let some of the age stuff and some of the pass catching stuff get in my way when it was so obvious that, like, dude, he's gonna be playing with Lamar Jackson, like just like, what are defenses going to do? Like, what are they going to do? And like, I kind of just got lost in the sauce about that. And until he like shows me he's actually fading from like a physical stance, I don't really think I can kind of buck that. Maybe it's like a guy like Cooper Kupp, right? Like we kind of factor that in and say like, all right, we're going to count some of this age because the decline started to happen. Maybe we start to price in some of that age, but yeah, like you said, it's case by case. But I thought I'd just pitch that because we were talking a little bit about it on another show, and that's like, oh yeah, I should have saved it for you to talk about because so like before we just get off of CMC, like, so because we know that he's still like, if even if we remove the Achilles and remove the PCL, like he does have the, you know, like I said, the history of missed time, right? Like he's missed double-digit games in 3 of his seasons. He's played 7 or fewer games in 4 of his 10 seasons. How much do you price that in with him? How aggressive is too aggressive with CMC this year?
Yeah, I mean, in drafts, I liked his price a lot better when I think he was going 12, 13 or past that in drafts. And now
I said, I apologize if I had anything to do with this.
You're that caught me off guard. Yeah, because I think he's going what now 7, 8 overall, if not higher. And I've seen some people still taking him 101, which it's like, honestly, especially if you're entering multiple entries and you want a unique draft or roster, it's like if you think he's going to stay healthy, which there's a very good chance he does stay healthy, he's honestly probably one of one that could have a chance of scoring 24, 25 points per game, right? So it's hard not to take that bet.
Isn't this just like a pretty binary decision, right? Like I understand why people wouldn't draft him, but like if there's probably no in between where he plays the whole season and is bad.
Yeah. Derek Brown actually just posted that. I think
right. Like is that not
yesterday?
Like, yeah, but there's like no outcome where he's like fully healthy the whole year and it's like a bad fantasy asset, is there? Like
I don't,
because the 49ers because you can say like, all right, well, what if the 49ers like their window's closed, but like they have the easiest schedule in the NFL. They're still like top 10 projected points. Like if he's on the field, he's going to be scoring points. And you brought up when we talked about Juwan Jennings in the wide receiver segment about him potentially being the third target. I assumed you were counting Christian McCaffrey as 2 behind George Kittle, because even when he played last year, his 2 healthy games with Brock Purdy, he had 19.5% of team targets.
Right. And no Debo this year.
Yeah. And no Debo. Yeah. All that stuff near the line of scrimmage. So yeah. I could see some of the rushing efficiency stuff being kind of down if like, you got 37-year-old Trent Williams, we got some moving pieces on the offensive line, but his pass catching role is still in an era where I just did an article last week, if you go to the site, about the 7 years in a row running back targets have declined, and like it's turned into a little bit of a Konami code for running backs. If you have a Devin Achane or even Alvin Kamara, a guy who has declined, if you got a running back that's catching passes, that's a finite resource right now.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons we'll talk on Kenneth Walker. That's one of the reasons that despite his health, I'm actually in on Walker because of what Clint Kubiak could be doing.
Well, listen. Yeah, let's go ahead and just use that as your own segue. I'll let you take it away with Kenneth Walker, who he didn't participate in OTAs because either lingering ankle, groin. Mike McDonald said he wasn't concerned, but this is a player that's not played a full season on his rookie contract yet, and he's had like a bunch of stuff, like the ab injury, calf injury, ankle injury. That's a smorgasbord of stuff. We saw he opened the year where it looked like he had a shot to be the RB1 overall. And then just kind of faded as the injuries kind of mounted, and Seattle kind of, caved in on themselves a little bit as the season went on in totality. But yeah, talk about Kenneth Walker, about the injuries he sustained. How concerned are you about where we are right now? And then we can get into some of the fantasy stuff.
Yeah. So when in terms of injuries, we always talk about injury prone, like are players injury prone or are they not? Walker is one of those guys who I would say is injury prone, or at least on the list. To be concerned about, because it's all lower extremity. It's all groin injuries, it's hamstring injuries, it's ankle injuries, it's all soft tissue. And I do think there's something to tie in to his biomechanics, how he runs, how he moves. I think there's some concern there. All that being said, looking into this is kind of where I try to pair the injury analysis with the fantasy utilization, where like Clint Kubiak, I mean, we know he produces points for his running backs. And then looking at Seattle's offense, even though, they have JSN, they have Cooper Kupp, I don't know who they're going to use, maybe MVS, maybe Torrey Horton, maybe this year, probably not. But as they don't really have a good vertical threat. But that offensive line is atrocious. So Sam Darnold's probably going to have to dump it off a good amount of times. And he's probably going to look to Kenneth Walker a good amount, who I would think they would use Kenneth Walker over Zach Charbonnet as a receiving threat. Will Walker put up Alvin Kamara numbers? I don't know. I don't think he's as good as Alvin Kamara is, at least in his prime. And I think Walker has more injury history or injury risk there. And a guy like that, sorry if I'm rambling, but
No, you're good.
Trying to pair in like bad offensive line. This is where my brain goes with injuries and soft tissue related stuff. Volume, especially if volume goes up, bad offensive line. He's probably going to be taking a lot of hits. He doesn't go down very often. So he's always trying to fight for more yards, fight to miss tackles, which means he's getting hit even more and at awkward angles. So that to me increases his risk of getting rolled up on, dealing with high ankle injuries, stuff like that. Again, so hard to predict any of that. But if he somehow escapes all of that injury free, I think his upside is tremendous this year, mostly because Clint Kubiak and at least having a sufficient quarterback in Sam Darnold.
Football season is right around the corner, and there's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your dream team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count towards your quest for a share of $15 million. And if you're looking for someone to plug into your Best Ball lineup, there's nothing better to buy than year 2 wide receivers. Looking at wideouts that have been selected outside of the top 24 based on years in the league, second-year wideouts have delivered the highest hit rates for beating their ADP and delivering wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 scoring seasons. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 Best Ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of $15 million. That's 2 chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
I will say, about Seattle's offensive line in general is that, while on paper it doesn't look particularly great, the bar is so low for the improvement of what they had last year. And, they only had 2 linemen playing all 17 games. Their center retired during the season. Connor Williams just retired in the middle of the year. And then also, the Clint Kubiak factor, I think this schematically can mask some inferior offensive line play. We just talked about the 49ers offensive line. You look at what Kyle Shanahan has done for obviously you have the anchor in Trent Williams, but he's had some subpar offensive lines and coaxed some good play out of guys. Out of guys that have gotten contracts and not performed when they've gotten those contracts elsewhere as well. We saw Mike McDaniel, it caved in on him last year with offensive line injuries, but the first 2 years in Miami, he kind of had that offensive line punching above its weight due to scheme as well, too. They do add Gray Zabel. So maybe when you look at Clint Kubiak, maybe just the scheme and the outside zone scheme, which I think does benefit Kenneth Walker's rushing style a lot. And I think it bears out in the stats too. On outside zone runs, he's averaged 4.7 yards per carry. On non-outside zone runs, it's only 3.8 yards per carry because he wants the freelance, right? He wants to kind of wants the drift. He gets himself in trouble. He doesn't have quite the Le'Veon stop-start stuff that Le'Veon used to do. I don't think there ever will be a player that runs like Le'Veon. But Kenneth Walker is also kind of a one-on-one in terms of rushing style. He kind of does his own thing. And I do think that could help him and make the offensive line maybe not good. I don't think the Seattle Seahawks offensive line is going to necessarily turn into a top 10 unit. But I think they could just have better peripheral metrics in terms of yards before contact and things like that because of the scheme. And maybe they could mask some of that stuff. And like you said, he was getting used as a receiver. Granted, scheme change. Maybe we don't see that as much, but he was getting used as a receiver for the first time in his career last year and heavily as a receiver. So there's a chance for some of that dump off stuff. And he's a guy that hasn't really climbed either. He's just kind of in that nebulous RB2 zone. But he's someone that I have kind of drawn to in terms of upside. Because, man, he's one of those guys I feel like if it ever does come together, it feels like it's going to really come together. So he's hard to quit in that capacity. So I do like that shout as well. But it is a good word of caution, though, about just kind of the mounting lower extremity injuries that he's had.
There's very few players I'm not huge on handcuffing your own guys. I never have been. He would actually be one of the, honestly, if I thought about it, it's probably maybe the only one who I would say, if you're drafting Kenneth Walker, I wouldn't mind at all snagging Zach Charbonnet, even though Charbonnet's price can be a little high sometimes. Just knowing that, okay, I'm taking Kenneth Walker at his cost and just assuming Walker's going to miss 4 games, if not more, right?
And that's why Charbonnet is priced where he is, because of the missed games. Every year it's been consistent. It's why people had but again, we did this with James Conner though, and Trey Benson got pushed up last year, and James Conner finally stayed healthy. I know he did miss week 18, but he got us to the promised land though, mostly.
That is true.
So again, injury prone until you aren't. Is that a real thing? Can we allowed to use that still? I don't know.
It is. Yeah, it is.
I do want to. I had him in the show sheet, and it's just because I don't know anything. And it's Joe Mixon. No one knows anything about Joe Mixon. Around OTAs, I think it was Aaron Wilson said that he was in a walking boot. There's been rumors like, did he have tightrope surgery? I haven't been able to find anything concrete. Do you know anything about Joe Mixon? And you know, they obviously had Nick Chubb after the OTAs too as well. So it's like, all right, well, what do we know about Joe Mixon? Is there anything to know?
Yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint. I know nothing. Not nothing, but yeah. Looking at the time frame, I tried to scour the internet when all that stuff came out, and from what I've gathered, I think he was in a boot just for a couple weeks, so it wasn't an extended period of time, which wouldn't fit a tightrope timeline. So I don't think he had a tightrope, but I can't prove that. The downside with Mixon, though, without knowing the information on what exactly it was, he has the history of a Liz Frank injury back in, was it 2020, 2021 with Cincinnati, the Zach Taylor ordeal. And then he had, I think in week 2 or 3, he had the right high ankle sprain, and then he sprained his left ankle, I think week 14 or 15. I should have put the weeks down. So he's been dealing with ankle injuries in the past, but I don't know. There's been no concrete information on, did he have surgery? Did he not? I saw the rumors as well that some people were, speculating he did have surgery. But I haven't seen anything. It may have just been precaution. Sometimes they do that with some of these players where they were training, they dealt with a little ankle sprain just to deload. They put them in a boot for, a week, just to help healing. So it's minimal load on the ankle. But yeah, as more information comes out, I'm hoping more information comes out over the next, as camp starts up. But yeah, as of right now, I don't have concrete information on that.
Just to piggyback off of, since it's related, Nick Chubb, a full year removed kind of every of his injury. You brought up the quote that he had, and Nick Chubb's gonna put the work in. We know he is, over the history of time. How far can that go? What are you kind of expecting from Nick Chubb? We don't know the usage, and I won't try to pinpoint exactly how Nick Caley is going to use these guys, because again, coordinator change again here in Houston. But how much do we think that he's going to bounce back? I think a lot of people are fearing kind of Javonte Williams, right? Like Javonte Williams just hasn't been the same player, and Nick Chubb's older, so he's still, even with him signing with Houston, he hasn't really budged. He's Dobbins. People are drafting Dobbins since he signed, but Nick Chubb is still just floating into the ghost land.
Yeah, Chubb would be one that especially with the unknown on Mixon and his injury history, I don't mind taking Chubb as a late round pick, because I think Chubb's the guy to have over Dameon Pierce or Woody Marks. Easily takes them over. What a lot of people I think forget is Nick Chubb. So year 2 coming out of that huge, Chubb had 2 surgeries on his knee. First the meniscus and MCL repair, and then the ACL reconstruction 2 months after that. So that first year, I think he did rush back, but he also fractured his foot last year. The good thing with that, at least, is, the time frame, it's usually about 8 to 12 weeks. And then you're getting back into your conditioning. So he's well within, especially 6 months out, you're well within a time frame where he should be back to himself, and actually now back to where he should be efficiency wise, how we would normally view a year 2 ACL player. So I actually don't have as much injury concern on Nick Chubb entering this year as I did last year.
Yeah, another team that has some offensive line concerns, but it's also, he walked back to a cesspool of an but like when he finally came back last year, I just don't know what we could even gauge.
Yeah.
How much was exactly the injury, how much was his fault, and it's really kind of tough. And that the next guy I want to bring up is in a kind of a similar bucket here too, because he came back during the season where he fractured his ankle. That's Isiah Pacheco, and when he came back, he was awful. Well, first of all, but also he came back to a situation that was awful. I mean, the Chiefs' offensive line at that point of the season was absolutely dreadful. I mean, Mahomes got hit over 100 times last year. It was crazy. The first time in his career he's taken that many hits and that many sacks. They couldn't run the football at all. It didn't matter if it was Pacheco. It didn't matter if it was Kareem Hunt. Like, they couldn't run the ball with anybody. So I'm interested in Pacheco. Well, one, the injury, how much the injury played a role in the efficiency drop when he came back, maybe versus the offensive line? I know that's hard to quantify. And then how we're expecting to handle him this year, because he's a guy that kind of no one really brings up. You look at this point last year, he was going as the RB10 and 19th overall in drafts, and now he's the RB26 in drafts, and he's still attached to the Chiefs offense. We talked about on the receiver show, we're anticipating a early season potential suspension for Rashee Rice. So that removes kind of another, short target guy off the field. Like, are we kind of undervaluing Isiah Pacheco, or is this someone that we look at him and we say, like, all right, he still was a 7th round draft pick. He's in a contract year. We don't really have a large sample of him producing as a front end player. So, like, are we just pricing in all this stuff? They bring Kareem Hunt back. They bring Elijah Mitchell in. They draft Brashard Smith at the round. But, like, you can easily point to all those guys and say, like, those were all wins for Pacheco too. So yeah, how are we handling Pacheco first from an injury stance, and then from a fantasy stance, are we kind of overlooking him?
Yeah, from an injury standpoint, I'm viewing him as a typical year 2 efficiency increase coming off essentially a tightrope or a fibula fracture repair. Very similar to how we viewed Tony Pollard. Year 1, expect a 20 to 30% efficiency dip. Struggles with acceleration, deceleration, cutting. And then year 2, a lot of those movement patterns should improve. So I think that's how we should view Pacheco, just from a health and injury standpoint. Just in terms of injury, I'm not fading Pacheco this year. I would actually be inclined to draft him. From a fantasy standpoint, I'd be more inclined to draft him if I could predict how this backfield's going to play out, which I can't. And plus, you mentioned Kareem Hunt. Hunt, Andy Reid trusts him. Andy Reid likes him as a player. Reid has talked a lot about just his maturity level and, growing as a person coming off of all the legal stuff in the past. And I think Reid actually values that and wants to give Hunt some touches because of that. And Hunt last year, he joined the team late. He didn't go through training camp and all that. So his conditioning level wasn't where it should have been. Where this year, he's in much better shape, at least per reports. Everyone's in their best shape right
Everyone's in their best shape, mate. All of us too, until you ask us Thanksgiving time, when we're all just shells, husks.
It's like, now I can't move. But yeah, so I mean, that's the part I have a hard time predicting. I've seen the reports on Elijah Mitchell. They view him as an explosive threat, both as a runner and as a pass catcher. I just don't trust him to stay healthy. Granted, we'll find out this year if he gets touches. Is that more the San Francisco 49ers scheme, or is it Elijah Mitchell as a player? Kind of like you said, he's injury prone until he's not, and I do think there's something to that just from an injury standpoint for running backs in their scheme.
Yeah, and you brought up Kenneth Walker's rush style, and talk about someone that has a unique rushing style, Mr. Pacheco. How much does that factor into kind of this injury? Because he's a very upright runner. Like he kind of like no one really runs like it. I think Ben Gretsch at one time said, like, you ever hear the phrase like no wasted movements with a running back? Pacheco's the opposite of that. It's all wasted movements.
Yeah, he's mad at every blade of grass on the field for whatever reason. He kind of like I said with Walker, just the way they run, they're going to be more likely to get hit, especially at awkward angles. And that's actually exactly how Pacheco's fibula was fractured. He stayed upright. He was tackled awkwardly in a position where, like, if he had just gone down, he probably would have avoided that. So if I could predict this fantasy backfield, I'd make money off this backfield and draft the right one. But Pacheco, from an injury standpoint, I'm fine drafting him from an efficiency standpoint coming off year 2 off that fibula fracture. But yeah, I kind of, if I'm drafting him, I assume that he's going to miss some games for some capacity because of his rushing style. He enjoys the physicality of the game and he enjoys taking hits.
Yeah, that's great to always to kind of put that in. We brought up with Kenneth Walker, and I used to, from the days, and if you're a 49ers fan, the days of Anquan Bolden, when he was remember Anquan Bolden literally broke his face on a play, like he almost caught a touchdown. This is when he was with the Cardinals, not the 49ers, but Anquan Bolden had a play style where you're like, this dude's like, he's just violent, like he's a man with violent tendencies, and sometimes you have these players that just Puka Nacua is like that a little bit. Yep. He's got some Anquan Bolden to him, like he's a crash test dummy a little bit sometimes.
Kittle.
Yeah, Kittle. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see this Chiefs offensive line and the moving pieces. If Josh Simmons coming off, we're not doing offensive line injuries, but Josh Simmons coming off of an injury. A lot of people said if he didn't have the injury, he would have been drafted a lot higher in round 1. They signed Jalen Moore as like a swing tackle. He comes to the 49ers. We'll see if he ends up playing. But these are guys like Jawan Taylor's basically been sunk cost. Kingsley Sumatia has like just not really done anything yet. They've just got a lot of moving parts here outside of Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, who we know are anchors. Obviously they trade Joe Thuney, so just a lot of things to factor in with the Chiefs and factor in. But I love that. That's going to put a bow on our running back conversation. Just as a reminder, you can find Jeff over at Destination Devy and 4for4 Football. We are going to have one more segment coming up where we're going to talk about some quarterback injuries and tight end injuries. Make sure you go back to our first show where we talked about wide receivers and look for that next show coming up.